Grandpa David was born on April 5th, 1928, in Beirut, Lebanon, to Simcha and Menashe Nahum, and as a brother to Giselle. As a young boy, my grandpa always wanted to immigrate to Israel and was an active member of the Zionist youth organization Hashomer HaTzair in Beirut. As a teen, he never hid his desire to live in Israel and told his family many times, "If tomorrow you wake up and don't find me, know I went to Palestine." In 1944, when my grandpa was 16, his mother, my great grandmother, realized that she couldn't keep him away from Israel for much longer. She decided to send him to an agriculture school in Kibbutz Shefaim. His parents put him in a taxi from Beirut to Haifa, but that taxi never arrived to Haifa with my grandpa because of the fact that at the crossing of the border, my grandpa got off the taxi and joined a youth Aliyah group that went to Dalia, which is a kibbutz 30 kilometers southeast of Haifa. In November 1944, three young men from Beirut arrived at the youth community in Kibbutz Dalia. Those three men were my grandpa and two of his friends from Beirut. They got used to life in the kibbutz quickly. The schedule of the day was working from sunrise until sunset in the fields. Very quickly, everyone surrounding my grandpa was able to see him succeed at the job he was given, which was working the fields. He too, at the time, fell in love with agriculture. In the kibbutz, most people called my grandpa Nahum, and many didn't even know what his first name was. His friends from those times say Nahum successfully took part in competitions, such as who dug the most holes for planting a forest in Dahlia, or who would collect the heaviest rocks in the fields that were meant to be cultivated. They say he always came in first in those competitions. They say Nahum was most likely sometimes lonely and homesick in Israel because of the fact that he never had any close family near, but they say that he was always surrounded by friends and was loved by everyone. His friends from the kibbutz say that shortly after Nahum came to the kibbutz, he was found to be a fantastic storyteller, and in great talent was able to add and make almost every one of his stories hilarious. They say that in every one of his stories there was a little bit of truth. They was able to twist a little to make for an even better story. In April 1947, training and recruitment for the Palmach, which was the fighting force during Israel's early days, started in Dalia. Shortly after training started, my grandpa, who was 19 at the time, was noticed by the recruiters and recruited for the Arabic department of the Palmach, therefore starting a new chapter in his life. My grandpa was a great candidate for the Arabic department of the Palmach, since the department was mainly based on immigrants who came from Arab countries, knew Arabic, and knew the Arabic culture well. My grandpa was appointed to serve as a spy that is disguised as a local Arab in order to carry out military operations and to gather intelligence, or more commonly known as a mistarev. He was perfect for the job because he lived in Lebanon, had basic education, his native language was Arabic, he had the Arabic look, and knew the culture extremely well, in a way that would make him fit in very easily. My grandpa did the basic training for the job at Kibbutz Ein HaChoresh, which is where the Arabic department had its training base. The program was mainly focused on making my grandpa fit into the Arabic society as quickly and as easily as possible, which included learning more about the everyday life in the Arabic society and about the Islam. After my grandpa finished his training, he was sent by the Palmach to gather information in the Arab areas and beyond enemy lines. Close by to the UN's vote about the two-state plan, the Arabic department needed to gather information about the deployment of the Syrian army in the Golan Heights. My grandpa was sent to Hanita to gather information about the matter. It was his first time going beyond enemy lines alone, and he gathered news about the deployment of the Syrian army under the cover story that he just got married, but his young wife ran away from his home, and he was now looking for her to kill her, which is somewhat of an odd backstory. After completing his mission, my grandpa came back unharmed and reported everything he had gathered. In 1947, my grandpa was sent to Eastern Jerusalem, or more commonly known during those times as the Arab Jerusalem, to gather information about the gang and terror organizations in the area, and the members and leaders of those groups. His cover story was that he's an immigrant from Lebanon, which fit him perfectly. He was appointed by the Palmach to work in a factory. He did his job so well that the owner of the factory offered him to marry his daughter, but of course my grandpa politely declined.
During the winter of 1947, my grandpa, the Arab factory worker, was arrested by the British for the charges of drug dealing, charges that weren't even slightly related to him. The British took him to jail. The cell he was put in didn't even have a mattress, and he had to sleep on the frozen cement floor for many days. Every 10 minutes, my grandpa asked to go to the bathroom, and the guard had to escort him to the bathroom every single time. One day, before sunrise, the guard broke and let my grandpa go by himself. My grandpa took the opportunity and was able to escape. He was able to get back to Haifa and was immediately put into hospital because he got very sick from all those days on the cold cement floor. These are just a few of the many amazing stories my grandpa had from his time serving for the Palmach. In 1950, my grandpa retired from the Palmach. With his retirement from the Palmach, he got a big truck from the organization as a thank you for everything he's done. From 1950 to 1954, he used that truck for his job, which was driving and getting gravel and stones to build roads. In 1950, my grandpa met Frida Gabay, who was studying to be a nurse at the time. He met her when he visited a distant family he had in Kibbutz Neve Eitan, and she was a friend of the family he had there. Good thing he visited them, because otherwise he would have never met that woman who would eventually become my grandmother. It was love at first sight, and after 4 years of being together, they got married at a small wedding venue in Haifa. In 1954, after they got married, they decided to settle down. So they lived right by Hospital Kaplan, which is in Rehovot and offered cheap housing for the nurses. That same year, my grandpa left his job as a trucker and started working by doing one of the things he loved the most, working in the fields as a farmer. He worked in the southern settlements of Israel, which were very far from where him and my grandma lived. Every morning, he would get up at 4 a.m. and drive an hour and a half to get to the fields, and as the sun set, he would drive another hour and a half back home. But that didn't matter to him. He loved his job. In his fields, he grew wheat, peas, peanuts, onions, carrots, celery, and his famous watermelons, which I'm told were the best and sweetest watermelons you could get. In 1961, my Aunt Michal was born to my grandma and grandpa, and when she was 3 years old, they moved to an apartment building in Rehovot. In 1965, my Uncle Eyal was born. Both him and Michal are described as being quite the troublemakers in their youth. In 1971, their youngest child was born, Shai, which also happens to be my father. My grandma always describes him as being calmer and not quite as troubling as his older siblings. There are many wonderful stories about my grandpa as a father that truly captures his beloved personality. Like how his face lit up when he was talking about this year's crops, or like how almost every day of the summer he would come home with 2 watermelons, one under each arm. He would take the watermelons to the kitchen and explain to his kids about the type of watermelon it was. My grandpa always said that each and every watermelon has a heart, the sweetest and best part of the watermelon, and my father tells me that my grandma would get the heart of the watermelon almost every single time. When my father finished his service for the army, he decided to take a trip to South America. He was one of the first people to do so at the time. Here's a part of a letter my grandpa sent him when he was traveling. December 22nd, 1994. Dear Shai, I'm writing you this letter from your room. I look up and I can see the picture of you, me, and Eyal on the peak of a mountain. Salzburg seen very clearly behind us. The 3 of us look so calm, so serious. How great was that family vacation that we spent together? What a genius idea it was to go travel and hike together. The summer goes on. The government has declared this year as a drought year. We still haven't felt the winter in the fields, and it's very sad, my son. In 2002, David Nahum, which I'm proud to call my grandpa, passed away from cancer. He was only 74 at the time and left behind him a loving wife, 3 beautiful children, 5 grandkids, and many amazing stories about all of his adventures. Although I never got to meet him, I always love hearing the stories he told and all the stories about him, which my father tells so well, just like him. I truly idolize him for his values and for all he's done, and I will make sure his legacy and stories forever live on.